Hey everybody, Todd Dills here with the June 8th, 2026 edition of the Overdrive Radio podcast, digging into issues of safety responsibility in the brokered freight world in the wake of the Supreme Court's May ruling, removing a key defense many brokers have used in state courts to deflect civil lawsuits against them for quote-unquote negligent hiring after a crash. In short, brokers are certain to feel the need to be able to readily defend their cases against such suits on the merits. How will they prove due diligence? We'll hear today from a good example of a good broker, generally speaking, in S2 International's leader, Jennifer Mead, who was honored last year by the National Association of Small Trucking Companies as 2025 Broker of the Year among its best brokers group of referred and creditworthy brokers. Mead and S2 have never been the target of a state civil suit, she said, with a little bit of a caveat.
I'm going to knock on wood.
She well knows attorneys and others get sue happy when a Supreme Court ruling like this settles a matter in question, though. Fully expects more cases to be brought. At once, she's not fundamentally worried about S2's position in that regard, focused as they are in the expedited freight world and with much of the company's business running on trucks and in vans of close partner carriers they really take the time to get to know. Another feather in their cap more carriers could do well to understand about the good brokers out there, she feels.
People don't realize we spend probably $110,000 a year on insurance coverages as a broker.
Safety liability, she notes, is an all parties case when it comes to responsibility. It's not just brokers and carriers who could do more on the relationship building side of real world vetting. Shippers no doubt have their stake in it too.
You know, I think the shippers need to listen more to some of the brokers and say, okay, yeah, maybe this one, the price looks great, but maybe I should go with one that's 5% higher because I know my freight's not going to get stolen.
A big question that lingers through it all is the responsibility of safety rating that law has long placed on the Secretary of Transportation and its Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Relative few of the smallest carriers with authority have ever been rated. Early results from Overdrive polling on the subject just last week show fewer than half of independents responding so far have a rating, for instance. And ratings generally have trended negative over the last decade and more as FMCSA has placed more targeted resources on problems rather than just issuing ratings. With all the private vetting systems and their scorecards and intrusive ID checks and the like rising up, and with sensationalism around the Supreme Court ruling not hard to find, NASTC and brokers like Mead are hopeful it spurs the agency to do more rating, rather than just rest on the laurels of the third-party vetting services with hopes that the market fills in the gaps. And about that veritable vetting industry.
Everyone is different. Everyone gives you different information. It's a moneymaker, too, right? So the more this gets sensationalized, the more money people make on the vetting side of things, or the advocacy side of things.
At once, NASTC itself might be getting into rating as a benefit to members, nonetheless, as you'll hear toward the end of our talk with Jennifer Mead. After the break, she dives into her history with S2, dating back more than 2 decades now to her early work in the expedited freight niche, heavy and auto manufacturing. Keep tuned.
Out here, every mile matters, so make every mile count. Diesel fuel is the lifeblood of your engine, and the cleaner it is, the better your truck performs. That's why there's Howe's Diesel Defender. It removes water, boosts lubricity, and cleans your fuel system, helping you burn fuel more efficiently and get more power from every drop. Use it at every fill-up for better performance and cleaner fuel. When you're counting miles, count on Diesel Defender from Howe's. Find Howe's at retailers nationwide. Visit howesproducts.com for more information.
That's HOWES, howesproducts.com. Big thanks to the Howe's team for their full line of fuel treatments and long support of Overdrive Radio. Here's Jennifer Mead, setting up where S2 operates today and diving into her own history in trucking. Here we go.
S2 is headquartered in McDonough, Georgia. I actually live and work out of Bluffton, South Carolina, near Hilton Head. Yeah, we've been in McDonough since the beginning, which is now we're finishing our 21st year. When I got out of college, I took a couple years to find my way into transportation, but I got a job with, at the time it was called Pilot Air Freight. Now it's Maersk. But I, got into transportation the way most women did at the time, which was in sales. So I started as a sales rep, and I changed companies kind of quickly. About a year and a half, 2 years in, I got recruited by a company called Surf Air, and they're unfortunately no longer in business. They went out of business, I think, in 2000. But I got a job with Surf Air, which gave me so many amazing opportunities. They brought me in as a sales rep, but I moved into managing sales and ops within a year. And then I started a division for them called Real Time.
For the carrier MLM, at the time headquartered in Michigan,
which was basically a premium logistics manager for them. So we managed Ford's inbound transportation into plants, all their time critical stuff. So, we managed expedites, air freight, charter, making the decisions on behalf of Ford. We also did that for GMSPO and Textron Automotive. And they had promoted me to start up that division. I was the managing director of Real Time, and they moved me down to Atlanta. That's how I kind of found my way down to Atlanta.
Okay.
But I left them just after I had my first daughter. Things were kind of not going great at Surf Air Real Time at the time, and so I left. I became basically an independent contractor for a couple different companies, which really is how I got into more of the expedited freight side of things.
Okay.
Shifting more from the air freight into ground expedite. And after, I don't know, I got in 2004, I left Surf at around 2000, actually probably 2005. I left the company I had kind of landed with for a little bit and started up S2. And I didn't start us as a broker. And in retrospect, I think my original idea would have been much easier. I started kind of like a manufacturer's rep for transportation companies. I picked what I felt were the best of the best, regardless of mode. I had some air freight, I had expedite, I had truckload, flatbed, LTL. And I was basically a sales agent for each of those companies. And I would just go and, talk to customers about what their needs were and their challenges. And, I would kind of set them up with the right fit carrier, So I wasn't operating as a broker. I was just bringing good carriers to connecting them with customers. But doing that, the customers started coming to me for everything. Well, we don't want to call your expedite carrier, this air freight. Can you just set it up? So then I'm calling and saying, okay, customer ABC wants this. And next thing you know, I'm a broker.
Okay.
How quickly did that happen? I mean, was that over the course of a few years or a long time?
It was, I started technically January of 2005. I worked in that capacity for about 2 years. So 2007. And then I worked as an agent for a company that didn't do the type of work that I did. So I kind of taught them and that side of things. And they helped me with the back office, the operations, accounting, all that kind of stuff. So I was technically a broker agent for about 3 years. And then it just really didn't make sense. I'm very hands-on with my customers. I was still doing a lot of the operations and the sales. And so that's when I started adding a couple people and started to grow S2 as a true brokerage. And we had our brokerage authority before that, but we weren't operating with it. It took, I guess that was probably 2009 or 10. So from that point to now, I mean, we've been very, very measured in our growth. Not only am I hands-on, I'm a little bit risk averse. I want to make sure that when I have employees, I can pay them. You don't want to bite off too much, which has probably slowed our growth down. But it's fine. I'm good with that. And we've grown quite a bit since 2010. Right now we have 30 employees. We've been as high as 40, but we scaled back at the beginning of this year. That we had a line of business that we were operating that wasn't working well for us, so we stopped that particular line of business, and we just kind of readjusted our staffing. But now we're adding back, so focusing more on our core offerings. The majority of our business falls in what you would call expedite, anything from sprinter van to dry van, anything with the time and service sensitive requirement. Unlike most brokers, we didn't start as a truckload broker. That's very commoditized, and we're very service oriented. We track our shipments on the expedite side a minimum of every 4 hours, proactively pushing those updates out. We have as many tracking people working on a given day as we do people trying to book freight, because the support of the business, making sure that we're delivering what we promise is very important. We're very much about proactivity, reliability, no surprises, so that's why the tracking part is such a big deal. So expedite is a huge part. We have a really cool portal now that we've put together, and our operations director, Christina Moyer, and our COO, Brian Lawson, they've worked really hard putting this together. We've got amazing LTL rates, and now our customers, even large customers, but maybe they're large in the expedite world, but they don't do quite as much LTL. They're coming to us and booking, quoting their freight online for LTL, booking it, printing out the BOL. It's a pretty slick system, and it ties in with a lot of the technology out there. One of the bigger ones is, we tie into 7L, so a lot of the freight forwarders can see our rates right from their system. So LTL is becoming a bigger part of our business. We do some international air freight export with a integrated carrier as our partner on that. But expedites where our bread and butter has been. Although we are actively looking to develop our truckload component, it's just finding the right people. When you talk about the whole carrier side of things, and now with all the vetting, and I mean, we're ahead of that game already, especially because we've been so time and service sensitive in our focus. Vetting's critical. You don't want to just put any local yokel on the load, right, and have a line shut down. 70% of our freight goes with our top, 80 carriers, maybe. So we're very focused on consistency with our carriers. Not to say that we don't add carriers every day. We do. We have to because of capacity. But we love owner operators. We would love to figure out a way to connect better with quality owner operators to move our freight. It's just challenging because I guess the biggest part is the communication. Like, how do you connect to them on a live load situation with, if you got 500 owner operators you're working with, kind of looking down a list to see who's where, that doesn't work. There's so many different load boards out there. but not everybody's on the same one.
Right.
So if someone could figure that part out, that would be amazing, because we prefer working with carriers that are, 1 to 50 trucks.
Despite what Mead described there as a sometimes difficult situation fitting the smallest trucking businesses into their system, they can and do work with owners new to S2 and newly with authority.
But like we've got a new guy on board, for example, and and unlike some people, he does have a new authority.
Okay.
We do typically restrict new authorities for a period of time. This one came recommended from someone we knew, and we really want to use him. It's just hard because he's one truck, and expedite, nothing is planned, right? So it's not like where the freight's going to hit that day. So, but we've opened up our minds more to new entrants as well, as long as they can present the right case to us as to why we should.
I mean, do you put a time, hard and fast kind of time on that typically? A year, 2 years, something like that?
Well, I think typically, and I'm not 100% sure where we are with it right now. I know it's at least 6 months.
Okay.
I know at one point we were a year. But again, if they come recommended by somebody, or maybe it's a guy that was running for a small carrier and we had some relationship with them through that carrier, we know what they do, we're definitely not opposed, but we have to have those conversations and understand who they are.
Mead and Company clearly place a premium on what you might call first-party vetting, as it were. Relationship building in more plain language, of course. It's what many in the owner-operator community around the nation have asked for as the rise of the third-party carrier vetting industry has proceeded these past years. Mead's got a preference for U.S.-owned and operated companies. Not always the reality in today's trucking world.
In the expedite world, we are challenged a lot with overseas operations that are sneaking in, and not to say that they don't do a good job. Some of them do a really nice job, but a lot of them, we don't really know where they're operating from. And so that's why the vetting is really important for us. And having an American-based company is really important.
For you guys, the whole vetting comes down to direct contact. Sounds like, having conversations, getting to know the people that you're working for. In addition to, do you use a system that like third-party system?
We use a lot of different systems.
A lot of different ones. Okay.
We are on highway, which helps us, maintain especially a good database on insurance and all that. We getting the notifications of when insurance is expiring and all of that's really important, because a lot of people just check the insurance once and they don't really pay attention to it, and these things change a lot. If you look at anybody's SaferSys record, you can see canceled, pending, canceled, so you really have to stay on top of that. We use highway, freight validate, we check some to a certain level on that. Just a variety of different ones. But for us, it's the personal connections really important. I try to reach out and talk to owners of the companies that we're working with to get a better understanding. And it's important too for me as an owner, because we were using a carrier a while ago. Great job. But I started seeing things, I go out and, look at all the threads, all the noise on the internet, the different blogs and all of that. And, I was hearing some stuff about this carrier. And so I reached out to their owner, and I was concerned about how their insurance was set up, because, what you find in expedite is really interesting. A lot of these carriers will come to you. Everything looks perfect on paper, right? they've got their 100,000 in cargo, they've got $1 million in auto. Some of them, we really prefer them to have general liability as well. They have, a nice insurance cert, you check, it's valid. But maybe they list 2 or 3 units on there, right? And then next thing you know, you're looking out there and they have 70 trucks available that day. And you're like, where the heck are these, on your insurance cert? And they use drivers that run for multiple carriers, and they require those drivers to have their own 100,000 million. But how can I check that? I don't know who's on that load, right? So we've talked to this one carrier. They ended up getting shut down for a bit, not due to me, but due to some other people out there, and they changed their setup. They went out and they got hired non-owned as well, and they've made changes to their lease agreements. I don't think in the expedite world you'll ever get rid of the multi-carrier model, because with expedite being so hit or miss, these guys need to keep rolling. But it puts a different twist on vetting that the truckload brokers don't have to deal with quite as much.
You've been sort of embroiled in vetting for quite a long time, so it's like in a way that the truckload maybe hasn't. Yeah. Again,
because I'm hyper cautious. It's as a small business owner, you don't want something to take you down that you might have been able to prevent. And I think that's the biggest thing about this whole Supreme Court ruling. I don't agree with the ruling. A broker is an intermediary. We do have responsibility to make sure that we're picking selecting a carrier that is a good carrier, right? But we should be able to rely on the government for a lot of that information. And the information that the government has is spotty at best. In the expedite world, you see all these guys that, they have PO boxes as their addresses, as their primary address, which is not right. There's all sorts of stuff. The government has not done the job that it should do. I do believe they're improving that. Yeah. The FMCSA is becoming much more, aggressive, but you should be able to look and have a carrier with satisfactory status and say, okay, the government says they're satisfactory. I should be able to use them. Now, do they meet my standards? Now I got to go a little bit further, but from a safety perspective, I should be able to know.
You should have some baseline of, some baseline information that you can rely on that you kind of can't at this point. I don't know. It sounds like.
Yeah, and back when all the different, when you look at the safety data out there, we've set our thresholds. If someone is above a line, we won't work with them. If there's something in there, we will look at things and say, okay, when did this happen? Okay, it was 3 years ago. What's their rate? What's their record look like since? We will make some of those judgment calls. You have to if you want to run a business, but it's a full-time, vetting's a full-time job, and we should be able to rely more heavily on the government for that. And I think too, the carriers have their responsibility in it. This whole thing got shaped as a broker liability thing. It's not just the broker. I mean, there's a lot of entities in a shipment that really need to be more responsible. Carriers need to be more responsible with the brokers that they work with. A lot of them don't want to work with brokers, but there's great brokers out there like us that provide amazing service and tremendous value to a shipper. A lot of times, we'll even say to our customer, hey, I've got someone for this load, but we just don't feel comfortable with them. We're not sure that we're buying what they're selling. And so we're going to pass on this load. And then only to find out that the shipper booked that carrier through another broker. I think the shippers need to listen more to some of the brokers and say, okay, yeah, maybe this one, yeah, the price looks great, but maybe I should go with one that's 5% higher because I know my freight's not going to get stolen.
On the carrier side of the equation, Jennifer Mead feels many aren't doing their own due diligence about the broker they happen to be working with too. Compounding issues for those with true skin in the game. She'll use that phrase later. One broker red flag for her? She said S2 is not the kind of middleman that leads with a rate in negotiation, and would only rarely, maybe on the truckload side time to time, post a suggested rate with a load. Rather, the company strives to truly work with what the carrier gives them in terms of their rate. It's a measure of upfront respect in some ways, but also just a practical matter.
We are a middleman, and we take what the carrier gives us and we market that to our customer and say, okay, and we know the rates, we know where it should be. So if someone's giving us something that's ridiculous, then we know we won't be offering that. But if, people realize, we're kind of revenue neutral. It's our job to help our customers understand what the current market is and for a quality carrier. And this is what you should pay us for it and for the ancillary services we're providing as that broker.
When it comes to vetting a service provider carrier for any particular shipper's load,
so we have to look at all the variables. I just don't know how that's going to happen in an environment where a lot of the owner operators and small carriers, especially, they're like, oh, brokers, they stink, and carriers or brokers are like, oh, these carriers, they all suck. I mean, until people start working together a little bit better, understanding that it's a symbiotic relationship and everybody has their role to play, I don't know how it's going to get much better.
I mean, think about this Supreme Court decision, basically, people say it's holding brokers accountable for their hiring decisions in some form or fashion. I guess it is, but technically what it did was remove a defense, right? It removed the possibility of the F4A defense against a negligent hiring claim. Is that something that you guys have ever faced at a state level in a civil case like that, or no? It's just not been something that you've been involved in.
No, I'm going to knock on wood.
Yeah. Okay, knock on wood. Yeah.
We've had very good success over our 20 plus years. We have very few freight claims, and we haven't had any issues like that. No, it's not something. Now, I assume that everybody's going to be faced with it more when something like this happens. Everybody gets, sue happy, and but I think it'll kind of. I think for someone like us, and I hope this is true, we have a documented process for vetting.
Right.
We have good rationale for when we stray from that. I think for people like us that have that process and are able to say, because this doesn't say like you're automatically going to be negligent if it's bad. No, we have to be able to stand behind our decision. And hopefully, because of what we do, if that were to happen, a jury or a judge would find that, we did the best that we could with the information that we had. Things change so rapidly too with trucking. I mean, they may be a quality carrier today and they had their safety record looks great. We use them today and they have an accident tomorrow. I mean, accidents do happen. Or, maybe that accident happens after we vet them and it takes a year or two to kind of catch up on the FMCSA or any, I just think that the ruling, I think a lot of people have sensationalized it, some for good reasons, because, the whole point of being a broker is to have that intermediary status. But I think some people have sensationalized it for their own benefit. I mean, look at all this that you asked about tools and I mean, there's a bazillion tools. And I mean, we're signed up to, probably 5, 6 right now, but everyone is different. Everyone gives you different information. It's a moneymaker too, right? So the more this gets sensationalized, the more money people make on the vetting side of things or the advocacy side of things. It's a good fundraising tool. We are a member of TIA. We have been for a long time. Our bond is through TIA. I think they're an amazing organization, and 95% of the time I am in full agreement with what they're pushing out there for the industry. But they'll probably see a benefit from this as far as getting more members, right? To get access to the tools that they have, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I think if you're a broker, you should be a member of TIA, period. But I think you should be members of a lot of different things so you can, get as much information as possible. I'm on the board of TINA, the Expedite Association of North America. I participate with NASDAQ. We're in Women in Trucking. And I think being an educated company, whether you're a broker or carrier, is important.
The message I hear coming out of the associations a bit, NASDAQ for sure, and TIA is in response to this. It's like we need a bona fide safety rating for most carriers, and we don't have that. Under the current system, we're never going to get there.
That is 100% true. And
you agree with that, right?
I totally agree with that.
Like, yeah.
And and on the expedited side of things, it's even more challenging because if your loads are moving on Sprinter vans or, a 12-foot box truck, I mean, those aren't regulated. So, and that's what a lot of these guys will complain about, like on the highway, they get flagged, right? A Sprinter van, but that's because they have there's no rating on them. There's nothing. So there needs to be a tool for that too. There's so much misinformation out there. They're like, well, I don't need authority to operate my Sprinter van across state lines. You see that all the time. And I'm like, yeah, you do. But other people say, oh, no, you don't. And they're like, well, the broker's name should be on the bill of lading. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't. That should be your name on the bill of lading, because if there's a claim, they're going to whoever's the carrier of record, and it's not me. We put on our rate cons, S2 is not the carrier for our customers. No. The carrier is X. That carrier should be on your bill of lading. I mean, we spell it out because we're trying to cross our T's and dot our I's because there's just so much misinformation out there.
I guess any carrier with authority, though, would be subject to a safety rating process and a new entrant audit. I think, like what the NASDAQ folks have long argued for or talked about is a simple, new entrant type audit that is like a fit or unfit kind of system, rather than this conditional, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory. That theoretically could hit most carriers out there.
Jennifer Mead's seen the new entrant carrier experience up close in the past when S2 for a time activated authority and dabbled in running expedited freight as their own carrier, ultimately shelving that operation when the pressures of keeping assets loaded in the unpredictable expedited freight world proved too great to continue. She had this to say about compliance for new entrants, by way of getting back to the notion of a fit or unfit safety rating judgment for more motor carriers.
That whole process was an eye-opener for me, because when you become a carrier, nobody really tells you what to do, like in a logical manner. And I think when I first did it, I think our UPS store address was on there, and I was like, I had to change that. But nobody really spells it out for you. And now that we've got more experience still under our belt from the brokerage side, we're looking at reopening S2X because I think capacity is going to continue to be a challenge on the expedite side as some of these unsavory people are kind of exposed. And I think it would be important for us to have the avenue to flip and try to, maybe capture some of those good owner operators out there and put them on with us. We're going to be different. We're going to do it differently this time. I'm not really going to be focused on Sprinter vans. I'll be focused more on the straight trucks. And those are regulated.
Equipment-wise, she means there. Unlike most non-hazmat haul vans, they'll be crossing scales and getting inspections. Too often on the van side of the business.
The problem with the expedite is you jump into expedite, all these guys jump in, and there's nobody that really tells you anything because it's not regulated, right?
Yeah.
It would be really great if there was a true pathway for those types of carriers. I mean, they're carriers. We got someone that gave us their insurance cert, and they have hired non-owned, but they didn't have any, not one unit listed on their policy at all. And I'm like, how can you be a carrier if you don't have one unit? They're basically an unauthorized broker at that point.
Yeah.
They're illegally brokering freight. So I just, for us, getting that back up and running, I mean, that's not a priority today, but it's going to probably be in the next, 2 years. I think carriers or brokers and carriers all need to be looking at what are the avenues that I need to go to protect myself. And for us, one of the biggest expenses, I mean, and this is the misnomer too. People think that, if you're a broker, you're sitting in your basement in your underwear booking freight, right? But there's a lot of like real brokers out there. And I think it's so important that, brokers understand and have, avenues to do things in the right way, and people understand the costs. And, people don't realize we spend probably $110,000 a year on insurance coverages as a broker. The broker sitting in their basement in their underwear does not, right? But, we have contingent auto, contingent cargo, we have errors and omissions, we have excess liability, we have cyber coverage, cyber fraud. There's so many different things that most people say, well, if you're a broker, you have no skin in the game. You don't have the costs that we have. Well, some of us do. We provide full benefits for our employees. I mean, we spend, over $100,000 a year in health benefits.
In other words, you've got skin in the game, right? You pay for your insurance, upkeep on the truck, diesel, all the rest. Why wouldn't you look for brokers as partners with similar investment in their business? We'll be digging deeper into broker vetting throughout the coming weeks, thanks to all who took our recent broker-related issues and practices survey, which will certainly inform coverage of credit checks and other ways to vet that skin in the game, as it were. NASTIC's best brokers group you can generally be certain about, including S2 and Mead. As I suggested earlier in our talk, NASTIC has long argued for more safety rating at the federal level. And President David Owen's letter to Congress we reported on last week emphasized that need. In the association's upcoming newsletter, Owen is appending a note to that letter to Congress with a pledge to association members to do its own rating for them. Quote, in the not-too-distant future as a NASTIC member, he wrote, if any member has not received a new entrant audit or, quote, if you're unrated, we are prepared to issue a rating on your behalf. Owen's long considered doing that as a kind of private safety certification on top of benefits of membership in NASTIC, available to carriers to market and or for brokers in its best brokers group to access, among other ways to distribute. The most quote-unquote perfectly safe carriers, Owen said, are too often those with no rating, and with little to no violation data in the system giving FMCSA any reason to ever bother looking at them. No investigation, no audit, equals no possibility of a rating. Jennifer Mead felt that any private rating system like that should really rest on a solid foundation of information, could be a beneficial addition to the current landscape, though no safety panacea in and of itself.
I definitely see the value in NASTIC, and I definitely see the value in having, like, if they had a system that said, this is the rating, there was a true formula that at least gave people a good starting point. I think that would be a huge feather in someone like NASTIC's cap, and a real reason for carriers and brokers to play in that space. But I think if you could pick qualities that are absolutely imperative, at least for that starting point, whether it's, they have a physical address, they're not operating out of out of Ukraine. And that's hard to say too, because so many of these brokers and carriers, are using the Philippines and, people for their customer service. But I don't really think their dispatchers should be even nearshored. I don't know. So I don't know what the criteria would be. There's got to be a way. I mean, I guess if we could figure it out, we'd be rich.
Here's a big thanks to Jennifer Mead for her time and to you for listening, wherever you're getting Overdrive Radio. It's on Spotify and SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts and YouTube, Overdrive's Facebook page, and any listening platform, really, including on world-famous overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio. Leave us a review via the platforms if you're enjoying these, and big thanks in advance for it. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. It's edited and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker-songwriter Long Haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis, the Snake Man himself, Whammick. Terry Two-Socks Richardson on bass. Keys by Tisha Mingo, Jim Whitehead. On drums, Andrew Marshall. The podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's on social media coordinator Jasmine Campbell, senior editor Matt Cole, executive editor Alex Lockey, and video editors Lawson Brudisel and Andrew Gwynn. We'll see you next week.